This is Tehran, the capital of Iran. And this here is a part of the city that looks completely ordinary. What's there to see? Just regular apartment buildings. But look at it from another angle. An entirely different reality comes into view. Beneath this neighborhood lies an entire underground network linking several buildings together. And do you know the most interesting part? This is where Ali Khamenei was hiding. And these aren't the only secret locations of Iran's leader. There are two more massive concealed sites in the northern and eastern parts of the city. How did Ali Khamenei move between these areas? The answer is simple. They were connected by tunnels. That makes it one enormous secret system. But even that's not the whole story. In reality, what we're looking at is a country that has built a huge number of hidden facilities across its territory, and each of them is believed to be concealing something extremely dangerous. So what exactly is this network of hidden sites? And how did the US and Israel manage to identify the location of Iran's leader in the first place? Let's find out. At this point, we know that Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, is dead. But where exactly was his main hideout in Tehran, the country's capital? The answer brings us right here. This is the Pasteur district, and it's often linked to the most important underground system in all of Tehran, and arguably in the entire country. Why? Because this area is essentially the brain of the state, its single most critical part. The presidential compound is located here, where the leader's administration operates. Just a few minutes away are the buildings of the Supreme National Security Council, the Expediency Council, and the Guardian Council. In other words, within roughly one city block, you have the institutions that pass nearly all of the country's most important decisions. But the most important site here is Beit-e-Rabari. This is where Ali Khamenei held his most important meetings. Everywhere you step in this area, there's a major state facility. So where's the entrance to the underground system? The answer is surprisingly simple. From almost every key building, there's access down to the first level of Iran's main hidden underground base. It lies about 33 to 98 feet below ground and is essentially a subterranean reflection of the world above. On the surface, there are offices, council buildings, and residences. Beneath them are their fortified counterparts. This is where the operational command centers are located. If a crisis begins on the surface, this is where the government and security forces coordinate their response. Nearby are secure communication nodes that maintain contact between the country's leadership, the military, and key state agencies. No ordinary phone lines here, everything's encrypted. There's also an analytical division. Picture a large room filled with screens, data, maps, and a constant flow of incoming information from every possible source. That's where intelligence is processed, the situation is monitored, and forecasts are made. In practical terms, if conditions on the surface become too dangerous, the machinery of the state simply moves one level underground. Same people, same decisions, just protected by earth and concrete. But this raises an interesting question. Say there comes a moment when all the key officials leave their buildings and head underground. How are they supposed to stay in contact with each other? Very easily. Actually, this is an entire interconnected system stretching for about 3 miles. Each of the district's most important buildings is linked to the others by underground tunnels. That means any one of these key figures could meet with Ali Khamenei, and he, in turn, could meet with them. And this is the point where you really have to stop and think for a moment what it really means. Underground, during the gravest national crisis, top officials are holding meetings and running the country. So the protection down there would have to be first-rate, right? Right. Engineers who design facilities like these think about electronics before anything else. Because if communications and computers fail in the middle of a crisis, the entire command center turns into nothing more than a useless block of concrete. That's why enormous attention is paid to shielding the site from electromagnetic pulses and surveillance. The walls of the key rooms are built like a complex multi-layer sandwich. Inside are shielding layers made of copper and lead. So if there's a massive electromagnetic surge outside, or if an enemy tries to jam systems through electronic warfare, the equipment inside can keep working as if nothing happened. But electronics are only one part of it. What about more physical threats, like a blast wave or radiation? Here again, the first level provides an important layer of defense. At a depth of roughly 33 to 98 feet underground, the facility gains meaningful protection from shock waves and radiation. The Earth itself acts like a massive shock absorber. Now add another layer of defense on top of that. Nearly all major bunkers are built from massive reinforced concrete. 3 feet of dense concrete can significantly weaken gamma rays and other forms of radiation, and in structures like these, the walls are usually far thicker than that. Okay, so the first level looks like a place where you could hide from almost anything while still continuing to run the country. But what if the threat's even more severe? What's Iran's leadership supposed to do then? That's where the second level comes in. Researchers estimate that it lies somewhere between 131 and 197 feet below the Pasteur district, and if the upper level is more like a vast command center, the lower one is designed for long-term survival. That's where the residential modules for the state's top figures are located. Not just simple rooms, but fully protected living units where they can live, work, and continue making decisions even if something truly catastrophic is happening above ground. And of course, a facility like this couldn't exist without infrastructure, so this level contains the life support systems for the entire underground network. Generators, ventilation units, air filtration systems, water tanks, and food storage. Put simply, it contains everything needed to keep the underground complex running like a self-sustaining organism. But now let's imagine a different scenario. Suppose some kind of emergency happens in Tehran, and one of the senior officials is not in the Pasteur district. What are they supposed to do? How would they even get to the most secure place in the country? That's where another interesting detail emerges. There are carefully concealed, heavily guarded access points to the system in other parts of the city. Some are located beneath medical facilities, others under underground parking garages, administrative buildings, or schools. Researchers estimate there may be around a dozen such entrances in total. Together, they form a kind of ring around the Pasteur district. Through these access points, people can quickly enter the underground system and, if necessary, exit just as quickly in another part of the city. As of today, it's believed that Ali Khamenei was killed right here in the Pasteur district at his residence. That naturally raises an obvious question. Did the leader have another place he could have moved to in case of danger? Some reports suggest the answer is yes. And we're not just talking about a few backup houses. Iran's leadership may have had an entire network of alternative shelters. Let's take a look at the map. If you move north of central Tehran, closer to the foothills of the Alborz Mountains, you'll find the Jamaran district. This is where the founder of the Islamic Republic, Ruhollah Khomeini, once lived. After his death, the area remained closely tied to the country's top leadership. And this is exactly the place many people believe could serve as a possible shelter. The district sits on the far edge of Tehran. There are wooded areas here, and overall it looks like a completely ordinary neighborhood where nothing much seems to happen. A perfect place to build some kind of bunker underground. But there's another important detail. Let's look at it from this angle. The area lies right beneath the mountains. That makes it even more suitable for protecting senior officials, since tunnels, shafts, and reinforced bunkers could potentially be hidden beneath 300 feet of granite. That's why many analysts have long suspected that protected shelters for Iran's ruling elite may be located somewhere in these slopes. Okay, the location seems good, but from a counterintelligence standpoint, it has a major weakness. There are still buildings here, and a fairly large number of people live in the area. In other words, it would be relatively easy to spy on. That's why Iran is believed to have had an even safer secret shelter right inside Tehran itself. Here's an area called Lavizan. Let's zoom in. It clearly looks like a place well suited for hiding the country's most important figures. What do we have here? To begin with, there's virtually no development at all. Civilians simply do not live here, which makes it perfect for controlling everyone who enters the area. On top of that, the terrain is mountainous, which is perfect for building heavily fortified bunkers. And of course, there's plenty of forest cover, which provides additional camouflage. But why could this area have served as a shelter for Ali Khamenei and other senior officials? The reason is that during the attacks on Iran in the summer of 2025, Iran's leader was reportedly staying in Lavizan's underground shelters to avoid the danger. There are even reports suggesting that all of these shelters may have been connected by tunnels. If that's true, then at any moment, Ali Khamenei and other key figures could have moved between the safest locations in Tehran and across Iran as a whole. And this is where the most intriguing question in the whole story comes up. How did the US and Israel manage to locate Ali Khamenei when he had several hideouts at his disposal? Well, it was a large-scale, multi-layered operation. The first thing the US and Israel had to figure out was this. How do you even get close to someone so heavily protected? Someone who can disappear into multiple safe locations the moment danger appears. The answer was a long, meticulous intelligence effort. For months and even years, Israeli and American intelligence agencies worked together to study information about the movements, routines, and daily patterns of Iran's supreme leader and the people closest to him. And while the CIA relied primarily on human sources, Israel's Mossad went much further. It reportedly gained access to a substantial part of Tehran's urban surveillance network, including cameras on roads, intersections, and in areas surrounding the residence and the government district. Over the years, a constant stream of video footage and metadata was collected from those cameras. At the same time, analysts were studying the mobile communications network, cellular networks, tower activity, and the movements of phones belonging to people in the leader's inner circle gradually came together into a massive database. Over time, these fragments began to reveal a fairly precise pattern of life: when meetings took place, who traveled where, which routes were used most often, and how security behaved under normal conditions versus during periods of alarm. But gathering intelligence was only half the battle. The real challenge was something else entirely. How do you launch a strike without giving the security system time to respond? On February 28, 2026, the operation entered its final phase. Electronic warfare aircraft began jamming GPS signals, mobile communications, and some of the control channels used by the security system. Within a radius of several miles around the area, communications started dropping out altogether. Early warning systems stopped functioning properly, and the security detail lost the ability to coordinate quickly. Then the strikes began. Launched from aircraft and warships, they struck almost simultaneously from multiple directions. Different types of precision-guided weapons were used. Some missiles targeted hardened structures, while others were aimed at specific rooms inside the complex. Meanwhile, aircraft kept the entire area around the residence under control. Every strike was timed down to the second so it would hit precisely when Khamenei and his closest advisors were inside the kill zone before they could retreat deeper into the underground system. The result was immediate. Iran's supreme leader and several dozen senior officials were killed. The residence and part of the surrounding facilities were destroyed, and security forces simply did not have time to activate the underground evacuation system. That's what made me stop and think. Iran's a country that spent decades preparing for a conflict with the West. Could its entire protective system really come down to just a handful of underground leadership bunkers? Obviously not. In fact, Iran can be described as one of the most underground countries on Earth. Beneath its mountains, deserts, and military bases lies a vast network of hidden facilities, and many of them conceal things far more dangerous than bunkers for politicians. First, take a look right here. See anything? Neither do I. Okay, now let's check over here. Still nothing, just mountains all around. But here there are openings in the mountainside, and that's a lot more interesting because they're definitely not there by accident. In the mountains of Iran, there are what are known as missile cities. It sounds like a metaphor, but that's actually the real term. Beneath these mountains lies a vast network of tunnels stretching hundreds of feet deep into the rock. Some of them run for dozens of miles, and these are not just storage depots where missiles lie under tarps. These underground sites contain entire military complexes, production facilities, ammunition storage areas, command centers, and living quarters for personnel. And of course, the main reason these mountain bases got their name? Missiles. But if they're buried deep inside a mountain, how are they launched? Wide tunnels allow mobile launchers to move through the complex. Essentially, these are underground roads that let the vehicles drive straight to a concealed opening in the mountains. The scenario looks something like this. The launcher rolls out of a hidden portal, fires, and then disappears back inside the mountain just minutes later. For an enemy, that becomes a real nightmare. Striking a target you can't even see is incredibly difficult. Destroying a system hidden beneath hundreds of feet of rock is even harder. So how many of these bases are there across Iran? Well, no one can say for sure, but researchers generally agree there are dozens. They're scattered throughout many mountain ranges in the eastern and southeastern parts of the country. One of the best-known complexes is believed to be in Kermanshah province. Beneath the mountains, there lies one of the largest hubs in the country's underground missile infrastructure. And that raises an obvious question. If the goal is simply to hide missiles, why not just build ordinary bunkers? Bury them underground, cover them with thick concrete, and call it a day. The answer is pretty simple: physics. Even the strongest concrete has its limits. Modern bunker-busting weapons were designed specifically to penetrate structures like that. But when a facility is covered not by just a few feet of concrete, but by 1,000 to 1,600 feet of solid mountain rock, the situation changes completely. The mountain itself becomes a natural layer of armor that's nearly impossible to penetrate with conventional strikes. On top of that, major complexes do not have just one exit, they have dozens. Those exits are spread out over miles and carefully concealed. So if one portal is blocked by a strike or a landslide, vehicles can still get out through another. In some cases, the backup tunnels are even sealed behind false rock and only opened when needed. That's why taking out a base like this with a single strike is almost impossible. And this is where things start to get interesting. Okay, missiles can be hidden under mountains, but could something else be concealed the same way? Other weapons? Yes, and Iran makes that point very clearly, because in one location, the country managed to hide an entire airbase. This is Iran's Hormozgan province, a hard-to-reach mountain range about 75 miles northeast of Bandar Abbas. At first glance, it looks like nothing special, just barren mountains, rock, dust, and almost no sign of life. But this is exactly where Iran has hidden a garage for its Air Force. Inside are upgraded F-4 Phantom II fighter jets, Su-24 bombers, and Shahed attack drones. All of it can be moved out quickly through concealed exits and sent off to strike a target. But if an enemy knows the base is there, what stops them from simply collapsing those exits with bunker buster munitions and sealing everything inside the mountain? Well, it's not that simple. Missile launches do not require a very large opening, and the missiles are only going one way. But aircraft are a different story. They need much more space. They need a runway, and they also have to be able to come back. So yes, if the entrances were bombed, that would become a serious problem. Still, as of 2026, no information has emerged suggesting that the base is out of operation. So if Iran can hide missiles, entire underground cities, and even air bases beneath the mountains, why not do the same with its navy? In fact, Iran does that too. Along the rocky coastlines of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, Iran has built hidden bases packed with a huge range of weapons. For example, some of them house mobile launchers armed with anti-ship missiles, and the most striking part is that they don't even have to move out into the open to fire. The missiles can be launched straight from concealed revetments or through narrow openings in the rock that stay open only for a few seconds. From the outside, it all looks like an ordinary rocky slope, but inside it's a fully prepared strike position aimed at ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and that's not all. Iran's gone even further, hiding not only missiles under the rocks, but entire berthing areas for its navy. These are small, extremely fast attack craft designed for swarm-style assaults on enemy ships. On top of that, these shelters are also used to base Gedhir-class midget submarines, and they're hidden right here, near Bandar Abbas and on Keshem Island, in places that look like wide cuts in the cliffs leading straight to the water. The submarines enter through specially dug channels, literally slipping inside the mountain and disappearing into the tunnels. And at this point, a lot of people will probably remember that Iran has long been in conflict with other countries over its nuclear program. The main sticking point is uranium enrichment. From a physics standpoint, the gap between fuel for a nuclear power plant and material for a nuclear bomb is not actually that large. It all comes down to the concentration of uranium-235. Nuclear energy requires one level of enrichment, while weapons require a much higher one. Iran insists that its program is intended for peaceful purposes, power generation, medicine, and scientific research. Other countries see it differently. Their logic is pretty straightforward. If Iran is building a massive uranium enrichment infrastructure, then at any moment it could push the process further and produce weapons-grade material. But why do underground facilities matter so much here? Because Iran has hidden nearly everything related to its nuclear development underground. The first place that usually comes up whenever people talk about Iran's nuclear program is Natanz. In the early 2000s, a huge uranium enrichment complex was built there. Picture enormous underground halls packed with hundreds of centrifuges spinning at incredible speed, separating uranium isotopes. And what about protection? The facility was designed from the start as if its builders already knew that sooner or later someone would try to strike it. That's why the centrifuges were placed underground and covered by multiple protective layers, dozens of feet of earth, and massive reinforced concrete slabs above them. The concrete itself is unusual. It's strengthened with steel framing and engineered to withstand extreme loads. The overhead structures were designed to absorb major impacts from above and spread out the force of an explosion, preventing it from breaking through into the underground chambers. Did those defenses hold up during the strikes carried out in 2025? That's hard to answer definitively. Most of the damage affected above-ground infrastructure. Power systems, support buildings, and entrance portals. These centrifuge halls are much deeper below the surface. In other words, the complex was damaged and partially blocked, but no one seriously claimed it had been completely destroyed. Still, this site doesn't look quite as secure since it's not buried especially deep. So why didn't Iran go further and build a nuclear facility deep inside a mountain? In fact, it did. That facility is called Fordow. The Fordow complex was built into a granite mountain near the city of Qum. Its centrifuges are located roughly 260 to 330 feet beneath the rock. At that point, it's no longer just an underground bunker, it's a facility carved directly into a mountainside, and it too became a target. In 2025, the Fordow area was struck as well. The attacks damaged surface-level parts of the complex, but the underground facility itself remained largely beyond the reach of the weapons used in the first wave. A few days later, much heavier strikes followed. On June 22nd, strategic bombers used heavy bunker buster bombs. This is the most powerful conventional weapon of its kind in the American arsenal. A bomb weighing more than 13 tons, specifically designed to destroy deeply fortified targets. But even then, the outcome was anything but definitive. Satellite images showed several huge craters on the mountaintop. Even so, no one really knew what had happened inside the complex. There was no serious talk of the site having been fully destroyed. At this point, it's fair to say Fordow represents the peak of Iranian engineering. They hid the most important parts where almost no one could reach them. But Iran did not stop there. Several miles south of Natanz, construction began on another site. It's known as Kua Kolan Gazla. If Fordow is hidden about 260 to 330 feet beneath rock, this new complex appears to go even deeper. Analysts estimate it may reach around 500 feet underground. At that depth, the facility becomes nearly untouchable to ordinary airstrikes and extremely difficult to hit even with the most advanced bunker buster bombs. And honestly, this seems to mark a whole new level for Iran's underground facilities. It makes you wonder just how far Iran's secret engineering may eventually go.